out. If the quarterback can't get it done and you have capable running backs who can make gains in the run game, I understand not running the ball on first down and being predictable. You don't run the ball at all? Like first 15 plays, you're not going to run the ball at all? To me, that's a coach who's saying, okay, tough guy. Okay, Wentz, you don't want to run my offense? Okay, here, go ahead, do your thing. Let's see what you can do. And the answer is nothing.
All right.
We can go with that. We
We'll
can go with that.
Philly has not drafted a Pro Bowl player since Wentz, and that was back in 2014. Meanwhile, DK Metcalf, Seattle, they're in a different trajectory, everybody. Seattle is 8-3, good for the second seed in this loaded NFC playoff picture. Everyone is chasing the Saints at 9-2. Stephen A., what do you think? Do you think Seattle should be the favorites right now in the NFC?
Not going to lie to you. Right now, I'm looking at them in that fashion. That certainly wasn't the case before. I'm still holding out hope for Tampa Bay. But Seattle, to me, in terms of their balance, the pickup of Dunlap, Adams coming back healthy, having some balance on that defense with Metcalf being the stud that he is and Russell Wilson being who he is, I would have to say yeah right now.
Look, Dunlap was a good pickup. And with Wagner and Adams healthy, that defense should get better, although last night was not an indication. That's just the Eagles. I would say it's got to be the Saints, though. And I went back and forth preseason between these two teams in the NFC. And the reason I think it's the Saints, Stephen A., is actually because of a quirk of the way things worked out. Drew Brees got hurt. So that's bad. But if he comes back with enough runway, the man had a rest. And he's been beaten up by the end of most of these seasons, and he's looked bad in the playoffs in the moment of truth. But this is different now. Now Drew Brees will not have played those bunch of games, probably shouldn't look as worn down. Plus, he's extra motivated because this might be it. Probably the last season. He was thinking about retiring last season, right? So if this is it, he's on the best team that he's been on in years, maybe ever. They picked up Emmanuel Sanders, who's now healthy and playing. Michael Thomas. They have their number 2 receiver, Sanders, to go with Thomas. They have Kamara. They have everything he needs. They picked up Quan Alexander. Who can really play, but he had a big contract because he's good. That's how they were able to get him, right, from San Francisco. I think the motivation for Brees combined with the well-roundedness of the Saints, including on the defensive end, makes them my pick in the NFC. I think they're the team to beat.
Can't blame you for that, but I feel differently because I think the absence of Drew Brees could potentially come back to haunt them, even though he's going to get it together and you know that he's going to be precise and accurate for the most part. He's not somebody that necessarily moves the chains with his running ability. So as a result of that, it's compromised them in the past. Now, I know you're looking at Taysom Hill and you're seeing what he's doing, particularly with running the football. So that's a dual threat that Sean Payton can find a way to maneuver and utilize. But in the end, it's still a situation where you robbing Peter to pay Paul. Either Drew Brees is going to get the snaps or he's going to be compromised to some degree because Taysom Hill is going to get the snaps. We don't have to worry about that with Seattle and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is going to be there consistently, pretty much for every down, obviously avoiding if he avoids injury. And his ability to run with the football and move the chains along with throwing the football and having a stud like Metcalf and having Lockett and Carson coming back to run the football and add that Rough Rider element to the equation, along with Greg Olsen. I think that, I didn't see him last night. I don't know how hurt he is or whatever, but you're anticipating that he'll be back at some point being the tight end for Seattle. I just look at the multitude of weapons and the fact that they've improved their defense, and I think this is a team that obviously they can't be ignored, but right now at this particular moment in time, if I had to choose between the two, it would be Seattle because New Orleans may not have that consistency because Drew Brees has been out and he has to come back. And it's not that he's not going to be great, but if you're going up against greatness, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, potentially Tom Brady. You got all of that going on. That's a lot to ask of Drew Brees. It's not that he can't do it. Well, I'm just simply saying I wouldn't bet my money at this particular moment in time that he'd be the one to do that over those teams. Not necessarily Tampa because we know what they did to Tampa, but definitely Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson.
No, I just don't. I think it'll be too hot. I really do. I think it'll be too hot.
Even though, Sal,
it's the way it's happened, though, Keith.
The Super Bowl was just 3 years ago, and you know how this thing is. You've been in this league longer than me and Jay been alive combined. That coaches don't usually get put on a hot seat 3 years removed from winning a Super Bowl.
That's true, and plus he was only one of 4 coaches to make the playoffs 3 straight years. The others being Belichick with Brady, Sean Payton with Drew Brees, Andy Reid with Patrick Mahomes II, Doug Peterson with the revolving door at quarterback. So, yes, he's done it. There's no question. But I'm telling you, the feel in the town is going to be tough for him to overcome 3 wins. It really is, because when you look at it, the problems up and down on the field and in the lineup and the execution and the plan has not been a good look for the head coach and the coaching staff.
Wow.
So, I mean, and listen, Lurie hung on to Andy Reid for 14 years when it had gone bad, and he held on to him for 3 or 4 years beyond when most people thought it was time to move on. So I'm not saying that he's going to be let go. I'm just saying, you asked me, is it going to get hot? I'm going to say to you, Key, it's going to get very, very, very hot.
Well, they'll be able to cook some cheesesteaks, that's for sure.
Steamy hot.
Indeed. Geno's, Pats, Tony Luke's, the whole dang, as Sal well knows. Go ahead, Sal.
No, they're happy in South Philly because they had 6 in the hook, man. Come on now.
Those guys in the desert, they don't call them sharps for no reason, that's for sure. I will say to Sal real quick on the way out the door, Jeffrey Lurie was a Hollywood movie producer before he bought the Eagles, and there is no Hollywood ending coming this season. That certainly seems to be the case. Sal, we'll see you over the weekend on the Matchup Show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Great to have Sal Pal with us.
He's
Quick
the best.
note.
6 in a hook. He knows it so well.
No question
Story of my
about
life
it.
last night.
It's amazing how they continue to do it
I'm
day
worried
after
about
day.
you.
I'm
night
worried
after
about me
night.
too.
The first step to admitting you have a problem is admitting you have a problem. Okay.
Yes, on national radio. Yes.
We'll talk gambling later in the week. Just for those of you that weren't aware last night, because it is always coming down to Wentz and Hurts before we talk about the Seahawks here in 1 minute. Hurts was on the field for 2 snaps. He threw a 6-yard pass to Alshon Jeffrey. On that particular pass, Carson Wentz was split wide out. He also did come into the game to hand the ball off one. So essentially, that's essentially what Jalen Hurts was able to do last night. Let's talk a little bit about DK Metcalf. You mentioned it. Sal mentioned it. Key. He was known initially as a workout warrior, the guy with like the 2% body fat. Can anybody actually look that like an Adonis? He actually was able to do it. But think about this. 177 last night. Best game of the season so far. You could argue it was the best game for a Seattle receiver in the history of Monday Night Football. His best game his rookie year, the playoff game against Philly. So he's got something going on against Philly. To reiterate what Sal said, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside drafted 57th overall over Stanford, right?
I didn't like him. You know,
12
obviously,
catches,
I
inactive,
saw him.
COVID list.
I saw him out west a lot. It wasn't, no, not a chance.
Last pick of the second round, DK Metcalf. Third round pick of the Seahawks, Russell Wilson. If the Eagles are struggling, Howie Roseman, the executive vice president, is struggling. John Schneider, his opposite number in Seattle, they're hitting all the time.
Well, it's, you know, sometimes you evaluate, you over-evaluate. And when you don't have enough information about a guy, even though you think that your scout in that particular area is giving you that information, he's scouting wrong. And when you're looking at whoever scouts for Philly in the SEC Ole Miss region, they obviously didn't really break it down the way that it need to be broken down versus the person on the West Coast who scouted and sold his guy. Now he's got to live with that. The way it works in different than the NBA. There's all these regional scouts, and when they go in that room, they're fighting for their guy. They're fighting for the guy. And you would say collectively, as a group, shouldn't they just be fighting for the team? Don't really work like that, because if I'm a West Coast scout,
Fighting for your job, too.
I'm fighting for my job. So I'm like the dude out west. I like him. He's the guy. I'm telling you. Look at what he's done. Look at the comparisons. Da 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 da. And the other guy that said Ole Miss, his case is not as strong, and he has a neck issue. So it's kind of like he's got some medical issues. You know, a couple of teams passed on him twice, all of those sort of things. Pete Carroll says he's sitting there at the bottom of the second round. We can afford to do this. If it doesn't work out, oh, well, it doesn't work out.
2 stories, Key. A couple years ago, watching the draft, watching it actually on radio, Mina Kimes, I remember this, when they drafted, well, it's simulcast, Key. He's like, you can't watch on radio. It's simulcast like our show. Anyway, back to my original point. Watching Mina Kimes when they drafted DK Metcalf, she literally did like a Tiger Woods fist bump. Like, it was like, she was so stoked. And I remember going back and watching highlights of him, like, damn, this dude is different. And then I remember them paneling to him on the draft. And Zubin, it's the line that he said again last night. Should have never passed.
You want to hear it?
Well, you
Should have never passed.
You want to hear from him?
That was a T-shirt he wore on draft night to all the teams that passed him.
But here's what I'll say before we hear that.
Sure.
A guy like that's that big and runs that fast, I'm gonna find a place for him somewhere. If I draft him, he becomes a special team warrior on a gunner position. It's not gonna be a wasted draft pick.
Doubt.
Did he run the 40 in a 4.57 like Key?
If you think I ran a 4.57, little guard that you are, that's why Carlos Boozer was better at Duke. Let me hear that sound, man.
Indeed. Here's DK Metcalf essentially saying, you passed on me, and I passed by you all night long last night in the secondary.
I think we're just at the right time, right place. But